Bob Iger was the CEO of Disney, and then 2019 was a big year for movies. It was a big year for Disney. 6 or 7 blockbusters came out that made $1 billion, which is not what you normally see in a year, and so it was very big. That was actually Bob Iger's final year as the CEO of Disney, and then he stepped down and Bob Chapek became the new CEO of Disney. But then recently, in I think 2023, Chapek was fired and now Bob Iger is the CEO of Disney again. Bob Iger has been very well known for being talent friendly. He went up to Kevin Feige, for example, back when several years ago, and said, Kevin, what you're doing with this universe is working. We like what you're doing, so how can we help you make the MCU as good as it can be? How can we help you with what you're doing? And therefore, you see the kind of philosophy that Bob Iger has, trusting the talent. But Bob Chapek was not as talent friendly. He was more business friendly, more stockholder friendly. Rather than trusting talent, he was more of a guy who would micromanage talent. A guy who would say, Kevin, this is what we need you to do. We have a streaming service now. This is the amount of content you need to put out. Basically giving Kevin Feige a list of demands, saying, Kevin, these are all the things you need to do, rather than asking, how can we help you? Also, what you saw is that Bob Chapek is like, hey, Lucasfilm, Marvel Studios, announce a bunch of projects for the MCU and Star Wars to drum up excitement, but also specifically because if you do that, stockholders will buy more Disney stock, and thus that will bump up the share price. So that's why you saw in 2020 when Disney's Investors Day happened, a bunch of Marvel and Star Wars projects were announced, though after that not that many of them have actually happened, but all these projects were announced so that the share price would go up. Well, you see there the big difference in philosophy between Iger and Chapek. It seems to me like Bob Iger was brought back in because there's a recognition that what Bob Chapek was doing wasn't working as well. Because after Endgame, there was definitely a decline in box office performance as well as quality for the MCU. And in fact, Bob Iger has made statements talking about brand dilution, saying that we have a problem that needs to be fixed, rather than just focusing on making more money, focusing just on trying to bump up the share price or things like that. Bob Chapek was a guy who would trust middle management people, the business people who are just trying to ensure Disney would be as successful as possible, rather than actually trusting the talent.